I don't sell memories. I sell choices, and yours is next.
She sold stolen memories for a living, until she saw one that belonged to her. The market floated above the planet like a broken halo, a ring of ships, stalls, and light bridges stitched together by magnetic tethers in desperation. Below it, the world of Karen V slept under a permanent storm, its oceans black as ink and its lightning slow, too slow, like the sky was thinking before it struck. Nyx Valoran walked through the memory exchange with her hood down on purpose. On Karen V, hiding your face meant you had something worth taking. Her skin was a cool pearl gray with faint, iridescent freckles that shimmered when the neon signs flickered. Her eyes were the giveaway, too bright, too deliberate. People on the market called her an archivist, like it was a myth you could buy and sell. Nyx preferred professional. A dealer waved her over. Valoran, I heard you're looking for the impossible. Everyone's looking for the impossible, Nyx said, voice calm, amused. I'm just better at finding it. He pushed a small case across the counter, no bigger than a coin box. It was made of obsidian glass with a lock that wasn't mechanical, a lock that watched. Nyx didn't touch it. You didn't open it. The dealer swallowed. It didn't let me. The lock pulsed once like a heartbeat. Nyx felt it in her teeth. That shouldn't happen. That meant the case wasn't just storing a memory. It was storing a living imprint, a memory that still had agency, a memory that could resist. Price? She asked. The dealer's eyes darted toward the sky bridges, toward the shadows between stalls. Not credits, not alloys, not favors. Nyx sighed, then say it. A day, he whispered. One full day of your life on record. Nyx smiled as if that was funny. It was. On Karen V, time was the only honest currency. Memories could be faked. Metals could be diluted. But a day was always real. A day meant pain and boredom and choices you couldn't undo. She should have walked away. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a thin, silver strip, a chrono writ, a contract that sliced off time with legal precision. She signed without looking up. The dealer flinched as the strip drank a day from her future. Nyx barely felt it, like losing a drop of water from a river you'd already accepted would end. Then she took the case. The lock warmed under her fingers, acknowledging her, not as a customer, as if it recognized her. Nyx moved quickly, weaving through crowds, merchants shouting, drones humming, children laughing in the only way children can, like the universe can't hurt them yet. She didn't go to her ship. Too predictable. She went to the reflection chapel instead. It was an old cargo container converted into a quiet room, lined with mirrored panels that had been cracked and repaired so many times the reflections looked like 1,000 alternate versions of you trying to agree on a single face. People came here to relive lost lovers, dead parents, their own childhoods, to purchase closure in hourly increments. Nyx came here because the chapel had privacy dampeners, and because she didn't trust herself. She sat in a booth and placed the obsidian case on the table. The lock blinked again. A thin seam opened like an eyelid. Inside was a single memory seed, an organic node, pulsing faintly as if it was breathing. Her hand stayed steady. Her heart did not. Nyx slid a needle-thin reader from her sleeve and pressed it to the seed. The world dimmed. The market noise faded, and a new reality unfolded behind her eyes. She was standing in a corridor that smelled like sterilized air and burned circuits. The walls were white, too white, as if light itself had been punished into obedience. Ahead, a door. Beside it, a human man in a torn uniform, blood on his knuckles. He looked exhausted, angry, alive in a way that made the air sharp. And then he turned his head and stared directly at her. Not past her, not through her, at her. In a memory, people never did that. Nyx's breath caught. That's impossible, she whispered, though her mouth didn't move in the vision. The human stepped closer, eyes narrowed like he was searching for a lie. You, he said, voice rough. Finally. Her stomach dropped. Who are you? He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with losing and decided to win anyway. You don't remember me. That's the problem. The corridor lights flickered red. An alarm started to howl, distant but rising. The human grabbed her wrist. She felt the grip, the heat, the realness of it, and pulled her toward the door. Nix tried to pull back. "This is a memory. You can't. You think this is a memory." He snapped. "Nix, listen to me. Your kind doesn't sell memories, you sell branches. Branches of time. Branches of reality." Nix froze. Only archivists knew that secret. The memory exchange didn't trade recollections. It traded forked timelines, clipped and packaged so buyers could taste lives they never lived. Regret as a product. Hope as entertainment. Nix had always told herself it was harmless, that it was better than war. The human shoved a small device into her palm. It was warm and humming, shaped like a key. "You were supposed to use this," he said, "before they caught you." Nix asked. The door behind them dented inward with a heavy ooh-da-ah air, something trying to break through. The human's voice softened, just for a breath. "I'm Cale Arden. I was the one you trusted when you decided to steal a timeline from the council." Nix stared at him. The name didn't land in her mind like a memory. It landed like an echo. "And you loved me," he added, almost like he didn't want to say it out loud, "long enough to ruin your life for it." The door buckled again. A crack split down its center. Cold air spilled through, carrying a scent like metal after lightning. Nix's throat tightened. "I don't know you." "I know." Cale's eyes flicked to the key in her hand. "That's how they're winning." He leaned closer, and for a terrifying moment she thought he might kiss her. Because the angle, the closeness, the way the air changed between them felt like that kind of inevitability. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers like a vow. "Whatever you do," he whispered, "do not let the Archivist Council see what's inside your head." The door exploded inward. A figure stepped through, tall, armored face hidden behind a smooth mask that reflected the corridor lights like a featureless moon. Its voice wasn't a voice. It was a layered chorus that spoke directly into Nix's mind. "Return the original timeline, Nix VALOREN." Nix jolted in the booth, gasping. The reflection chapel returned around her in a rush of sound and light. Her hands trembled. The memory seed still pulsed under the reader, but now the obsidian case was doing something else. A second seam opened, a compartment she hadn't seen. Inside was a council sigil, an official mark of authority, and beneath it, a live transmission shard blinking with an incoming call. Nix stared at it, dread crawling up her spine. The call identifier displayed a single word, Archivist Prime, and then before she could move, the chapel mirrors all around her synchronized at once, every reflection turning to face her, every version of her smiling in the exact same way. "Hello, Nix," they said together. "We found you. If you were Nix, would you answer the call, or smash the shard and run? Comment what you'd do, because the next choice changes which timeline survives." The call wasn't ringing in her ears. It was ringing in her identity. Nix stared at the blinking transmission shard while 100 mirrored versions of her smiled back from cracked glass. The reflection chapel felt suddenly smaller, like the air had been measured and found insufficient. "Hello, Nix," the mirrors repeated, perfectly synced. "We found you." Her first instinct was to smash the shard. Her second instinct, older, sharper, was to learn what the hunter already knew. Nix slid her thumb along the shard's edge and accepted the call. The temperature dropped. A silhouette formed in the air above the table. Tall, robed face obscured by shifting bands of light. The figure did not look at Nix's body. It looked through her, as if her skull was merely a window. Archivist Prime spoke without sound, directly into the chapel's dampeners. "Polite of you to answer." Nix kept her voice steady. "Polite of you to use my reflections as speakers." "Efficiency," the Prime replied. "You are in possession of council property." "It's a memory seed," Nix said. "If you're so confident, come take it." The Prime silhouette leaned closer. The air smelled faintly of ozone, storm scent like Karen V below. "Do you know what you purchased?" Nix glanced at the pulsing seed. She could still feel Cale's grip on her wrist, the impossible realness of it. A forked timeline. A pause, almost interest. and inside that fork is an unregistered door. Nix's stomach tightened. A door to where? The Prime's voice softened, which somehow made it worse. To the original, the timeline you were born in, the one you chose to abandon. Nix's pulse stumbled. That was not possible. Archivists were trained, certified, cataloged. Her whole life was documented in council ledgers. Unless those ledgers were the lie. Nix forced a half-smile. If I abandoned it, maybe it deserved to be abandoned. That is the tragedy of your species, the Prime said. You confuse survival with freedom. Nix's hand slid under the table. Her palm found the small humming key Kale had pushed into her hand, still warm, still wrong. You didn't answer my question, she said. What happens if I open the door? The Prime's silhouette fractured into thin lines like a film being pulled tight. You already did. That is why I am speaking to you now. Your purchase triggered a return beacon, one only you can activate. Nix's mouth went dry. So you can't activate it. Correct. Why? The Prime's pause was longer this time. Because the beacon is built from your first decision. Your original consent. The part of you we removed. Nix felt suddenly sick, not from fear but from the philosophical insult of it. If someone could remove your consent, what was left of you? A weapon, a tool. Her reflections, her copies, smiled wider. Nix leaned forward. Then you don't want the seed, you want me. I want the missing portion of you returned to the council, the Prime replied. In exchange, your remaining years will proceed without interruption. Your day-to-day life, your market trades, your small, comfortable lies. Nix laughed once sharp. And if I refuse? The chapel lights flickered. The dampeners whined like a dying animal. Then you will be corrected, the Prime said simply. Behind Nix, the door to the chapel clicked. Someone had entered without being announced. Nix did not turn her head. She watched the mirrors instead, every reflection shifting their gaze to the newcomer at once. A human man stood in the doorway, exactly as the memory had shown him, except now he was real enough to cast a shadow. Torn uniform, blood on knuckles, eyes that didn't belong in a place that sold regret like candy. Kale Arden. Nix's throat tightened around his name. How? Kale's gaze locked onto the shard above the table. Don't listen to it. The Prime's silhouette did not move, but Nix felt its attention pivot, cold and immediate. Ah, the parasite has arrived. Kale stepped closer, ignoring the mirrors. Nix, look at me. If you answer one more question, it will map you. It'll map the part you don't remember. Nix's voice came out smaller than she wanted. You're real. Kale's jaw flexed. Real enough, not safe enough. The Prime's voice threaded through the air like a needle. You see, even now you are drawn to anomalies, to the unfiled, the unrecorded. The human is a contamination. Nix's fingers tightened around the humming key under the table. You said I loved him. Kale's eyes softened for half a second, like pain trying to be gentle. You did. And I don't remember. I know. Nix stared at him, trying to decide if the ache in her chest was instinct or manipulation. Why did you come here? Kale's gaze flicked to the memory seed. Because that seed isn't just a door, it's a bridge. Nix's pulse rose. Between what? Kale exhaled as if the explanation hurt. Between timelines that should never touch. You've been selling branches. But the council, he nodded at the hovering silhouette, has been pruning them. Killing entire realities because they don't like what grows there. Nix looked back at the Prime. Is that true? The Prime's voice turned almost tender. We do not kill realities. We stabilize. We prevent uncontrolled divergence. We prevent wars that begin with a single unapproved choice. Nix felt the philosophical blade, order versus freedom. The oldest argument in the universe, dressed up in neon and contracts. Kale stepped closer until he was beside her booth. Nix, they erased you once. They'll do it again. Nix swallowed. Then why did they leave me here at all? Kale's eyes flashed. Because you're useful. Because you're good at making people believe their lives are small. Nix's reflections smiled like they approved. She stood slowly, keeping one hand under the table on the key. If the seed is a bridge, What happens if I cross it? Kale's voice lowered. You meet the version of you that made the first decision, the one they couldn't control. Nix's skin prickled. The idea was terrifying and intoxicating. A self she'd never been allowed to be, a self with intact consent. The Prime's silhouette sharpened. Do not romanticize your missing portion. It was dangerous. Nix met the hovering figure with calm rage. Dangerous to who? The Prime did not answer. Instead, every mirror in the chapel went black at once, as if the reflections had been turned off. Then the glass lit up with a single symbol, a circular sigil like an eye made of broken timelines. A council lock. Kale's hand shot out and grabbed Nix's wrist, warm, steady. They're about to send a cutter. Nix's breath caught. A what? Kale didn't look away from the mirrors. A reality enforcement unit. It won't arrest you. It won't negotiate. It will just simplify. The air in the chapel vibrated. The floor hummed as if something enormous had aligned itself just outside the walls. Nix lifted the obsidian case with her free hand, the seed still pulsing. With the other, she pulled the key from under the table. It was brighter now, reacting to the lock on the mirrors, reacting to her pulse like it had been waiting for her to decide. She looked at Kale. If I use this, there's no going back. Kale's eyes held hers, unflinching. There was never a safe back. There was only the version of you they allowed. A sound like a blade sliding out of reality scraped along the chapel door. The lock symbol on the mirrors blinked once, twice, like a countdown. Nix raised the key toward the memory seed. Her hand stopped a centimeter short, because the seed wasn't just pulsing anymore. It was pulsing in a pattern like a message. 3 short beats, 2 long, 3 short, a distress code, from inside the original timeline. Nix's voice shook, not with fear but with sudden, brutal clarity. Someone in there is alive. Kale's grip tightened. Nix. The chapel door began to split down the middle, silent and precise, as if the universe itself had decided she'd had enough time. Nix looked at the key, looked at the seed, looked at Kale. Then she made a choice. If you were Nix, would you open the bridge to save whoever is signaling from the original, or destroy the seed to stop the cutter from finding you? Comment your decision, because Chapter 3 follows the choice. She opened the bridge, and the room immediately tried to delete her. Nix drove the humming key into the memory seed like she was stabbing a lie. For half a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the seed unfolded. Not with gears or light, but with permission, as if reality had been waiting for her signature all along. A thin oval of darkness peeled open above the table, deeper than shadow, edged with faint silver static. The air around it tasted metallic like bitten coins. Kale swore under his breath. That's it. That's the original scene. The chapel door split cleanly down the center. No explosion, no splinters. Just a surgical line, widening as something stepped through from the other side of normal. The temperature dropped again, and Nix felt her freckles flare with involuntary shimmer. A cutter entered. It was humanoid only in the way a knife is shaped like a tool. Tall, jointed wrong, its armor smooth and matte as if it drank light. Where a face should have been, there was a mirrored plate, except it didn't reflect Nix. It reflected the empty version of the room like she was already gone. The mirrors on the walls stayed black. The cutter tilted its head, and Nix heard a voice, not in her ears but in the part of her mind that handled certainty. Unauthorized divergence detected. Stabilization initiated. Kale grabbed her hand. Jump now. Nix's instincts screamed to run, but her logic did something colder. It calculated the cutter's posture, the angle of its arms, the distance to the booth. It wasn't walking toward them. It was aligning, like it didn't need to cross the room to reach her, like it could simply decide she wasn't allowed to exist where she stood. Nix stepped onto the booth seat, lifted the obsidian case, and shoved it into the oval of darkness. The bridge accepted it. The cutter's mirrored face rotated slightly, tracking the movement. The air hummed. Nix's teeth ached. Kale pulled her toward the opening, but Nix yanked him back for 1 second, just long enough to snatch the transmission shard off the table. The archivist prime silhouette still hovered above it, fragmented by interference. "Nix," it whispered, suddenly urgent. "Do not cross. You will not return as—" Nix crushed the shard in her fist. It shattered like ice, and the silhouette died with a soft, disappointed silence. "Romantic," Kale muttered, and then the cutter moved. Not forward. Reality around them bent inward, as if the room was being folded into a smaller, more obedient shape. Nix felt her breath compress, her heartbeat threatened to stutter. Kale shoved her through the oval. Nix fell. For a moment she was weightless in a corridor of layered images. The market, the storm planet, a childhood she didn't recognize, a face that looked like hers but older and angrier. Sounds overlapped, laughter, alarms, a lullaby in a language she somehow understood. Then she hit ground. Hard. Cold stone under her palms, dust in her mouth, air that tasted like rain and old paper. Nix pushed up and stared. She was in a cathedral, or what used to be one. Vaulted ceilings arched overhead, carved with geometric patterns that reminded her of branching trees. The stained glass windows were shattered, but their remaining fragments glowed faintly, not from sunlight. There was no sun here, but from a pale blue ambient hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The bridge behind them was still open, a thin oval of dark static hovering between two broken pillars. Kale stumbled through after her and rolled to his feet, scanning the space like a soldier in a nightmare. Nix's pulse hammered. "Where are we?" Kale's voice went tight. "If the seed wasn't lying, we're in the original timeline's archive layer, the place the council tried to erase and couldn't." Nix looked around. There were shelves, endless shelves. They climbed into the darkness like ribs inside a giant creature. On them sat thousands, no, millions of memory seeds, all pulsing faintly in their cases like sleeping hearts. A library of lives. A museum of choices. Nix swallowed. "This is what we've been selling." "Not exactly," Kale said. His eyes were wide, almost reverent. "This is what they've been stealing." A sound echoed high above them, metal tapping stone, slow and deliberate. Nix froze. Someone was walking on the upper catwalks. Not running, not hiding, approaching as if they owned the place. Nix's hand went to her coat out of habit, fingers finding the small shock blade she used for market disputes. It felt pathetic here, like bringing a pocket knife to an eclipse. Kale leaned in. "If that's a council unit." "It's not," Nix whispered. She didn't know how she knew, she just did. A figure appeared at the edge of the catwalk, framed by broken glass and the faint blue hum. Tall, elegant, unarmed. Hair like dark silk pulled back in a severe knot. Skin pearl gray with iridescent freckles, Nix's freckles, but brighter, more alive, as if they had never learned to hide. The figure looked down at Nix with eyes that were unmistakably hers. Only these eyes were older and furious. Nix's throat tightened. "That's—" "Yeah," Kale breathed, "that's you." The woman descended a narrow staircase without hurrying. Her steps were sure, like she trusted the ground to behave. When she reached the floor, she stopped a few meters away and studied Nix with clinical intensity. Then she spoke. Her voice was Nix's voice, but without the market polish. It had weight, heat. "You're late," the woman said. Nix's hand shook. "Who are you?" The woman's lips curved in something that wasn't a smile. "I'm the part you outsourced so you could keep sleeping." Kale took a careful step forward. "We need help." The council sent a cutter. The older Nix flicked her gaze to him, and something sharp passed across her face. Recognition, disgust, pain. "You brought him," she said softly. Kale stiffened. "You know me." "I know what you are," she replied. Her gaze returned to Nix. "Tell me, when you look at him, do you feel comfort, attraction, like your loneliness finally has a shape?" Nix's chest tightened. She hated that the answer was yes. The older Nix nodded as if confirming a hypothesis. Then they did a clean job. Nix swallowed. "What do you mean, what he is?" The older Nix stepped closer, and the blue hum in the walls rose like a held breath. "Do you want the truth that frees you," she asked, "or the truth that keeps you functional?" Nix forced herself to hold her ground. "I want the truth." The older Nix's eyes flicked to the still-open bridge behind them. Through it, Nix could see the reflection chapel, distorted, folded, wrong. And in that distortion, something mirrored and matte was beginning to push through the seam. The cutter had found the door. The older Nix leaned in and whispered, fast and precise. "Kale isn't your lover, he's your leash." Kale's face drained of color. "Nix, don't listen." The older Nix raised one hand, and the bridge shuddered as if struck by invisible force. The cutter's mirrored face emerged halfway through the oval, struggling against something the older Nix was doing to the seam itself. Nix stared at Kale, heart pounding, mind splitting into possibilities. If he was a leash, who was holding the other end? And why did part of her still want to trust him? Would you confront Kale immediately, or demand the older Nix explain how to kill a cutter before it steps fully into the original? Comment which move you demake, because the next choice decides who survives the merge. The cutter didn't walk through the doorway. It negotiated its way into existence, one rule at a time. Nix's eyes snapped between the mirrored face forcing itself through the seam and Kale's expression. Too still, too practiced, like a man bracing for a verdict he already knew. "Leash," Nix said, voice tight. "Explain now." Kale took a step toward her, palms open. "I didn't choose this." The older Nix, her original, kept one hand raised, fingers slightly curled as if she were holding the bridge by its throat. The oval of darkness trembled. The cutter's armor creaked against invisible resistance. "You can interrogate him after we're not dead," original Nix said. "Or you can die with excellent questions." Nix hated how reasonable that was. She turned to her original. "How do we kill it?" Original Nix's gaze sharpened. "You don't kill a cutter, you starve it." Nix swallowed. "Starve it of what?" "Certainty," original Nix said. "Cutters feed on fixed narratives, on clean records, on identities that can be filed." The cutter pushed harder. Its mirrored plate reflected nothing but a tidy, empty cathedral, as if it had already edited them out. The blue hum in the walls climbed in pitch. Kale's voice dropped. "Nix, it's mapping you through the seam. Every second you hesitate is a scan." Nix's mind raced. "Then we close it." Original Nix gave a humorless smile. "Closure is a luxury. We're going to do something messier." She nodded toward the endless shelves of seeds. "This is the archive layer. It isn't a room, it's a chorus. Those seeds are dormant decisions." Nix stared at the shelves. Millions of possible lives, each one a branch someone had clipped and sold. Original Nix's voice softened just slightly. "You've been trading in regret. Now you're going to weaponize it." Nix didn't like that sentence, but she didn't have time to morally object. "How?" Nix asked. Original Nix pointed at Nix's wrist. "Your chrono writ." Nix looked down. The thin silver strip she'd signed back on the market, a day of her life, was still fused to her skin like a scar. Original Nix's eyes flashed. That contract didn't just take a day. It created a debt line. The council can follow debts. Nix's stomach turned. "So I led them here." "You always do," Original Nix said flatly. "Not cruel, just factual. Because you were engineered to." Nix's gaze snapped to Kale again. "Engineered." Kale flinched. "Nix, listen." Original Nix cut him off with a glance sharp enough to slice. "He's a mnemonic anchor, a human-shaped lockpick. They use anchors to keep rogue archivists emotionally predictable." Nix's pulse kicked. Emotionally predictable. Original Nix stepped closer to Kale, not afraid of him, but offended by his design. "They calibrate you around him. Your trust, your attraction, your need to be understood, and when you drift too far from council control, he pulls." Kale's jaw tightened. "That's not all I am." "Maybe," Original Nix said, "but it's what you were built for." Nix felt heat rise behind her eyes, anger and grief colliding. A part of her wanted to laugh, because of course the universe would do this. It would take the one thing that felt like a lifeline and reveal it as a handle. Another part of her wanted to run straight back through the seam and punch the Archivist Prime silhouette until it apologized, which was irrational but satisfying to imagine. The cutter surged. Original Nix's hand shook. The seam widened a fraction. A cold pressure slid into Nix's skull like someone turning pages inside her mind. Stabilization protocol, personal history alignment. Subject, Nix VALOREN. Status, inconsistent. Nix's reflections weren't here, no mirrors, but she still felt herself being compared to a template. Original Nix hissed. It's trying to overwrite you with the Council's version. Nix's fingers tightened around the small shock blade. Then we make a version it can't file. Original Nix's mouth curved, impressed despite herself. Good, you're learning. She grabbed Nix's wrist, where the chrono-writ scar shone faintly, and pressed Nix's palm against one of the nearest shelves. A memory seed pulsed and responded like it recognized her touch. Nix jerked back. What are you doing? Borrowing, Original Nix said. If you can't beat a cutter with force, you bury it in ambiguity. She yanked open a seed case. Inside, a node glowed, warm, alive, humming with a life that wasn't hers. Original Nix thrust it into Nix's hand. This is a life where you never became an archivist, where you stayed on the storm planet, where you learned to survive without selling pieces of yourself. Nix stared at it, nauseated by the intimacy of holding someone's alternative self. I can't, she began. You can, Original Nix snapped. Because you already do, every time you sell a branch. The only difference is now the branch bites back. Kale stepped forward, voice urgent. Nix, don't. If you splice that into yourself, it could fracture you. Original Nix shot him a look. Better fractured than domesticated. Nix's hands trembled. The cutter's mirrored face pushed further into the seam. She could feel its certainty spreading like frost. She made a choice. Nix pressed the borrowed seed to her chest. The world lurched. For an instant she smelled ocean storm and wet stone. She felt calluses on her palms that weren't from market work, but from climbing slick cliffs. She tasted salt and stubbornness. She saw, behind her eyes, a version of herself laughing at lightning because fear was inefficient. Then the sensation snapped into place like a new joint in her soul. Nix gasped and smiled, sharp and unfamiliar. The cutter froze. Its protocol voice faltered, the first hint of confusion like a crack in glass. Subject history multiple. Alignment failed. Requesting. Original Nix slammed her raised hand down, and the seam shuddered as if reality had been struck with a hammer. Now, she said to Nix, use your debt line. Nix stared. What does that even mean? Original Nix pointed at the chrono-writ scar. That day they took from you, call it due. Nix didn't understand, but her new storm-born instincts did. She closed her eyes and pulled on the feeling of loss, on the missing day like a thread. Something answered. Time didn't rewind. It hollowed. A pocket of blankness opened around the seam, a non-moment where rules forgot how to be rules. The cutter convulsed. For the first time, its mirrored face reflected something, not an empty cathedral, but 1,000 overlapping Nixes. Market Nix, Storm Nix, Original Nix, and versions that hadn't been born yet. Too many to categorize, too many to erase cleanly. The cutter emitted a sound that wasn't pain but computational failure. Original Nix pushed her palm toward the seam like she was shoving a door shut against a storm. Nix, Kale said, voice raw. If you do this, you might trap me on the wrong side. Nix opened her eyes. He was looking at her the way someone looks at a confession they can't take back. And the worst part was, even now, even with the leash revealed, something in her still wanted to save him. Maybe that was the anchor doing its job. Or maybe that was just her, messy, human-like, refusing to become a clean moral equation. Nix stepped closer to the seam, feeling the blank pocket of stolen time trembling under her control. Tell me one true thing, she demanded, eyes locked on Kale. Right now, are you here because you want me or because you were sent to keep me? Kale's throat worked. For a moment, the confident soldier mask slipped. Then he said quietly, both. And the cutter, half in and half out of the seam, suddenly stopped struggling, like it had received new instructions. Its mirrored face turned slowly toward Kale. Anchor identified. Override authority accepted. Nix's blood ran cold. If Kale had override authority, Then the leash wasn't just emotional, it was administrative, and the cutter was listening to him. If you were Nyx, would you sever the seam immediately, possibly trapping Kale with the cutter, or risk keeping it open long enough to learn who gave him override authority? Comment your move, because the next chapter hinges on this choice. The cutter didn't obey Kale like a soldier. It obeyed him like a password. The air shifted. The blank pocket of stolen time around the seam trembled, and the cutter's mirrored face angled toward Kale with clinical devotion. Anchor identified, override authority accepted. Kale's eyes widened. No, Nyx, I didn't. Original Nyx snapped, don't speak. It's listening through you. The cutter lifted a mad arm, not to strike, to authorize. Pale glyphs crawled across its forearm like frost forming a signature. Nyx's instinct screamed. If it got a clean instruction, the archive layer would become a tidy, empty room. Kale, Nyx said, forcing calm, look at me. Who gave you override authority? Kale swallowed. I don't know, it's embedded like muscle memory. Original Nyx moved between him and the seam. Then we make the embed fail. How? Nyx asked. Original Nyx pointed at Kale's temple. Anchors are keyed to emotion. Change the association, you change the lock. Nyx stared. That's not a plan, that's therapy. In this universe, Original Nyx said, therapy is warfare. The cutter's voice threaded into Nyx's mind, issuing stabilization command. Kale's lips moved without consent. Nyx, stand down. Nyx's stomach dropped. His voice wrong cadence, polite execution. Nyx stepped closer anyway. No. The cutter paused, waiting for the rest. Kale fought for breath. If it completes the handshake, it'll mark you as returned property. Nyx leaned in, forehead almost to his, echoing the memory. She felt the urge to trust him surge. Automatic, beautiful, engineered. Then she broke the script. She kissed him, abrupt, defiant. Not romance as reward, romance as sabotage. Kale froze, then exhaled into it, surprised in a way no programming could fully predict. Original Nyx muttered, finally. The cutter stuttered. The glyphs flickered, uncertain. Nyx pulled back just enough to speak. Override is tied to what you expect me to do, she said. So here's a new expectation. You don't get to command me. Kale's eyes searched hers and something inside him cracked. An internal script meeting an unplanned line. The cutter glitched, command context, ambiguous, certainty starving, but it adapted fast. Its mirrored face shifted, reflecting Nyx now, a composite of overlapping selves still trying to resolve. Subject inconsistent, requesting anchor consolidation. Kale jerked like a chain yanked inside him. Nyx, run. Original Nyx slammed both palms toward the seam. The blue hum became a roar. Shelves rattled. Seeds pulsed in sympathetic panic. Nyx reached for the key. We close it. Not yet, Original Nyx said. If we close now, it carries the handshake back to the council. Then what? Original Nyx grabbed Nyx's wrist and pressed the chrono-writ scar against Kale's palm. The silver line lit up, bridging to him like a circuit. Nyx felt the debt line open wide. A day, she whispered, transferable. Original Nyx's eyes were ice. Pay it through him. Let the cutter file the anchor as the subject. Kale stared at their joined hands. If you do that, it'll erase me. Nyx's chest tightened with a stupid human ache. Was any of this real? Kale's voice shook. It started as a job, then I got stuck inside the job. That honesty landed like a bruise. The cutter lifted its arm again, impatient. Anchor consolidation initiated. The blank pocket of time began to collapse. Seconds. Nyx squeezed Kale's hand and pulled the debt line tight. Time hollowed, then flowed. A full day poured out of Nyx and slammed into Kale. Kale gasped. His pupils blew wide. Nyx saw flashes behind his eyes. White corridors, council halls, Archivist Prime silhouette, and a stamped phrase burning like a brand. Property return authorization. Nyx VALOREN original. Nyx turned slowly to her older self. It's your name on the order. Original Nyx didn't flinch. Of course it is. Kale staggered, voice strangled. She gave me override. Not the council. Nix's stomach dropped, betrayal and awe tangled. Original Nix stepped closer, grief wearing armor. "I didn't give you a leash," she said. "I gave you a key." The cutter's mirrored face snapped toward Original Nix. Original subject confirmed, and the cathedral lights, every last blue hum, went dead. In the sudden darkness, something massive shifted among the shelves. Nix felt the library breathe. Not metaphorically, dust lifted as if pulled by an inhale. Somewhere in the stacks, 1,000 seeds answered with faint, synchronized pulses, like a crowd deciding whether to cheer or riot. Original Nix's silhouette was barely visible now, but Nix could sense her certainty like a blade held close. Kale stood between them and the seam, trembling under the transferred day, as if time itself had become weight on his bones. And in that darkness, Nix realized the cruelest trick. The council didn't need to control every choice. It only needed to control the story you told yourself about who you were allowed to be. A second voice, older than the council, whispered from the archive layer itself. "Welcome home, Nix. Now choose which of you gets to live." Would you trust Original Nix's plan, or assume she just sacrificed you to wake whatever is hiding in this library? Comment your call. The library didn't want information. It wanted a decision with teeth. In the blackout, Nix could hear the archive layer the way you hear a crowd before you see it. A low, layered pulse rolling through the shelves, millions of seeds beating in imperfect rhythm. It wasn't random, it was a vote. "Welcome home, Nix," the hidden voice repeated, warm and ancient. "Now choose which of you gets to live." Nix held her breath and tasted dust and rain. She couldn't see the cutter anymore, but she could feel it, like a clean blade waiting for a clean answer. Kale stood rigid in the dark, palms still lit faintly where the crone or writ debt had branded him. His face was tight with pain, but his eyes were lucid, more lucid than they'd been since she met him. "Nix," he whispered, "the transferred day, it did something. It ripped open my embedded script." Original Nix's silhouette barely moved. "Good, then you can finally speak without permission." Nix turned toward her older self. "You put your name on the return order." Original Nix didn't deny it. Because the council only recognizes originals as legal persons. Branch versions are derivatives. They can be deleted without due process. Nix's anger flared. "So your plan was to let them target you instead of me." "It was to force the archive layer to wake," Original Nix said, "and it worked." The shelves answered with a soft, synchronized pulse like agreement. Nix's skin prickled. "What is this place, really?" The hidden voice spoke again, closer now, as if the darkness itself leaned in. "I am the continuity engine," it said. "The first archivists built me to hold every choice they were too afraid to live with. I keep what the council prunes." Nix swallowed. "So you're alive." "I am accumulated," the engine corrected gently. "I become more coherent each time someone refuses to be simplified." A faint scrape echoed, metal against stone. Nix's stomach tightened. The cutter was still here, somewhere in the dark, trying to complete its narrative. Original Nix lifted her chin. "Engine, can you eject the cutter?" The engine's pulse slowed, thoughtful. "I can confuse it. I can stall it. But to erase it, I require a stable identity to anchor my rewrite." Nix felt the weight of the earlier whisper, "Choose which of you lives." Kale's voice shook. "That's what it wants. One Nix, one file, one version it can protect." Nix looked between Kale and her original. In the dark, both were outlines, but the emotional geometry was clear. The council had turned identity into paperwork and paperwork into a weapon. Nix exhaled. "If I choose myself, what happens to her?" Original Nix answered without hesitation. "I collapse back into you, or I dissolve. Either way, the council loses the advantage of two targets. And if I choose her," Original Nix's tone softened a fraction, "then you become a memory in a shelf, safe, stored, unlived." Nix's throat tightened. She hated that safe sounded like a threat. Kale took one step toward her in the darkness. "Nix, if you merge with her, you might become unpredictable enough to break the anchor system, to make my leash meaningless." Nix's heart pinched. "And you?" Kale gave a small, broken laugh. I don't know who I am, without you reacting the way I'm built to expect. Original Nix's voice was sharp. That's not romance, that's dependency engineering. Nix surprised herself by answering quietly, and yet he's still here. In the distance, the cutter spoke, its voice now a thin, patient thread inside Nix's skull, stabilization resuming. Original subject required. Derivative subject terminated. A faint, cold light bled through the darkness, its mirrored face finding edges to define. It was reconstructing the room by reconstructing a story. Original survives, derivative dies. Nix felt her borrowed storm life instincts rise, cliff-climbing stubbornness, lightning laugh bravery. She felt Market Nix too, smooth, strategic, sick of being owned. And beneath that, something older, Original Nix's furious clarity. She realized the truth that hit like a clean note. The Council's greatest trick wasn't erasing memories. It was convincing people that being singular was the same as being real. Nix stepped forward into the cutter's faint outline. Kale hissed, Nix. Nix raised her hand. Don't pull, not now. She turned to the shelves. Engine, you said you need a stable identity. Yes, the engine hummed. One Nix, one anchor. Nix shook her head. No, you need an author. Silence, then a ripple of curiosity through the seeds. Nix faced her original. If we merge, we do it on our terms, not as a collapse, as a collaboration. Original Nix didn't speak for a long moment. When she did, her voice was rougher. That's not how it's ever been done. Then let's do it wrong, Nix said. She reached for her original in the dark. Original Nix met her hand. Their fingers interlaced, same bones, different scars. Nix expected pain. She expected a violent overwrite. Instead, she felt a door open inside her and a flood of missing consent returning like breath. Not just memories, choices. The moment she'd been recruited. The moment she'd agreed. The moment she'd been terrified and said yes because she didn't know she could say no. And then, in that shared space, Nix spoke a sentence she had never been allowed to form. I revoke. The engine surged. The shelves lit with a soft blue, returning like dawn. The cutter froze mid-step. Revoke, not recognized. Nix smiled, and it was both of them smiling at once. Market charm with original steel. Of course you don't recognize it. You were built in a world where consent is permanent. She turned to Kale. If you're my leash, then hear this clearly. I'm choosing you only if you choose me back without orders. Kale's eyes shone in the returning light. The brand on his palm flickered, searching for the old script. Then he whispered, I choose you. The embedded authority cracked like ice. The cutter's mirrored face finally reflected the room, and in it, Nix wasn't a single subject. She was a living contradiction, a person who remembered her consent and could withdraw it. The cutter tried to speak. The engine spoke first. Stabilization denied, it said, almost kindly. The cutter's armor dulled. Its outline lost confidence. It didn't explode or die dramatically. It simply failed to stay coherent in a room that refused a clean story. It folded inward, like a sentence being deleted mid-word. Silence returned, real silence, not enforced. Nix exhaled, shaking, and realized her hands were still holding her original's hand. Only now it wasn't two hands. It was hers, integrated, whole enough to be dangerous. Kale stepped closer, careful. Is it over? Nix wanted to say yes. Then the shelves pulsed again, faster, urgent. A new seam opened high above the cathedral, not like the one Nix used. This one was immaculate. A perfect oval, rimmed with white light so clean it hurt to look at. And through it, a familiar presence slid into the room like paperwork gaining a body. Archivist Prime. Its voice landed in Nix's mind with satisfied calm. Congratulations, it said. You did exactly what we needed. Nix's blood went cold. Needed. You awakened the continuity engine, the Prime replied. Now we no longer have to prune branches. We can harvest the trunk. Nix felt the engine's pulse hesitate, like a creature realizing it had been called by its true name. And in her palm, the Chrono-Rit scar burned, no longer a debt, a beacon. If you were Nix, Would you collapse the entire archive layer to deny the Council its harvest, even if it kills millions of stored lives, or gamble on bargaining with Archivist Prime while you still have leverage?